Ugh, I hate fall. Hey everybody, Deathstalker here. Normally I'd be on my bike, but we got a wee bit of rain today and we had a bit of a frost last night. So I thought I'd just sit here and let you look at my bike while I talk about the MotoGP race. So no changes to anybody who's been injured or sick. No word on Marc Marquez if he's coming back and when. Valentino Rossi is expected to be back at the next race at Valencia, fingers crossed. There was another rider who tested positive and had to miss this race and probably potentially the next race, and they have to have another test to confirm. Now, qualifying. Taki Nakagami was pretty much the fastest rider the whole weekend. In all the different qualifying sections, if he wasn't leading the leaderboard, he was in the top three. Then they went for qualifying, and he got the pole. Absolutely blistering lap, and it's the first Japanese rider, I think, in almost 20 years to have a pole on a MotoGP race. So that was quite an achievement. It also looked like he had the speed to win the race. So everyone was kind of like really keeping an eye on him. Now, Fabio Quartararo and Joan Mir, I'm not quite certain what was going on. It looked like they were having mind games the whole weekend. They were trying to follow each other and getting messages from the team saying you're being followed by, one or the other, and then the rider would pull into the pits. So I don't know what was going on. It's probably because they're the top two guys for the championship right now. So, and in qualifying, it was the same thing. They were both messing around with each other. Fabio, I think, only qualified 6th, and Mir qualified 12th. That's the lowest you could be in qualifying 2. The Ducatis, it was pretty much a disaster. None of the 2020 Ducatis were able to really get themselves hooked up and riding properly. The only Ducati that actually seemed to be capable of going anywhere was Zarco, and Zarco was out riding by himself. He wasn't trying to get toes and stuff, and he was actually fairly strong and managed to get himself a pretty good qualifying session in qualifying 2. The Suzuki's actually looked really strong. The Yamahas, for some reason, didn't appear to be as strong as they were last weekend. Except for Franco Morbidelli. Franco seemed to have a consistent pace, and he looked to be pretty much the most capable of all the Yamahas, considering he has the least up-to-date motorcycle. If you don't know, he's actually riding what would technically be last year's bike as far as spec, and he's been trying to make certain he would get a new bike. He'd be running the current spec bike for next season, and Yamaha basically keeps telling him no, so I don't know what's going on with that. Now, there was a few crashes, but nowhere near as we had the previous weekend. I think everyone got the crashes out of their system. But more or less, everyone was behaving. The weather wasn't too bad. They had to change the schedule. The MotoGP race was actually going to be held before the Moto2 race. I think the weather was going to be cooling in the afternoon, so they wanted to have the MotoGP guys out there at the warmest temperature. And so go for the race and have the start. The lights go out, and Taka had the whole shot. He got a really good launch. He was out in front. He was first from the first turn. A couple of people not so good. A couple of people actually were making up some ground. Taka would just be starting in the lead and was maintaining his lead until about the 4th corner, maybe the 5th, and he just tucked the front end going in and crashed out. And of course he was inconsolable because he was a Japanese rider with his first pole, potentially his first win in MotoGP, so he was pretty sad about that. And it's a learning experience. Like he hasn't led a MotoGP race, so you have to learn how to do that. And with a full tank of fuel, the bikes don't handle exactly the same as they would normally do like halfway through a race or even in practice sessions, because they generally don't carry full fuel loads. So Franco Morbidelli inherited first place after Taco crashed, but then in the first corner, once these guys had gone through, Brad Binder had tried to make a really big leap to the forward pack, and he was carrying way too much speed into the first turn and rear-ended Jack Miller, taking Jack out. And just so you know, like this is like, I think the fourth or fifth race now, Jack's has either crashed out or been taken out or had mechanical problems. Like, poor Jack's just having a horrible run of bad luck. And it's too bad, because if it wasn't for these other things happening, he was probably the most consistent Ducati in all the teams. And the result of that, Brad Binder is going to be given a long lap penalty at the start of the race in 2 weeks at Valencia for irresponsible riding, which is what that is. It's still a racing incident, but it was like, it's one of those, like, use your brain, dude. I've seen it, I had it happen to me. It's like, the positive side, I never did to anybody else. So the race was going on. Joan Mir didn't have a great start, but he was slowly working his way through the pack, and Alex Marquez was coming through with him. Zarco actually had himself in a really good, solid third place behind Alex Rins, but Zarco was starting to drop back. I'm not exactly certain. I know the Ducatis are having problems this year with that new rear tire, but Zarco was still fast. He was losing ground, but it's not like he was like going to be passed by everybody in the team. But eventually, Joan Mir caught Zarco, and the reason he had moved up to pass Zarco was he saw the message that Alex Marquez was coming after him. And Alex, again, Alex had started with a hard front tire, because the medium front tire he was using last weekend, it was pretty good, but it wasn't 100% right. The Honda can use the hard tire if the temperatures are right, and Alex was smart. For the first 2 laps, he sort of waited for the tire to get up to temperature before he started to move, and he was moving very well. And he had caught up to Mir, and then Mir passed Zarco, and Alex had to very quickly try to pass Zarco back. And the one thing about Zarco is, if you pass him, he'll pass you back at the very first chance he gets. He's very similar to how Marc Marquez rides. And it took Alex several corners, I think over a lap, to actually get past Zarco. So he had lost touch with Mir, but he was then again trying to work his way back up. And he happened to come into turn 2 and just lost the front end and crashed out. And that was too bad, because Taka had finished every single race of the season, and he was the only rider to finish every single race in the top 10. And Alex had finished every single race. Everybody else had crashed out of at least one race. Now Alex and Taka had both crashed out, so basically no one has raced a clean season. But Alex admitted that was a rookie mistake. He was trying to push too hard, and you got to learn. It's his first year. So essentially, as far as the rest of the racing went, it was everyone just sort of traveling along, and there was a few passes here and there. Pol Espargo did pretty good. Aleix Espargo had a phenomenal ride on the Aprilia. He was riding as hard as he could. He was all over Fabio Quartararo. But then, unfortunately for Aleix, his Aprilia, the engine just stopped. So his race was over, which was too bad, because he can ride. The bike is actually very rideable, but it just hasn't got engine reliability yet. So that's one of the problems that Aprilia has to work on. Dovi, surprisingly, didn't have a great race, but didn't lose that many points to the other riders. I think he's about 24, 25 points behind, I think. I'm not certain if it is. I'll put the list of who's what in the standings. Mir, of course, by finishing third, he's now got I think it's like 14, 15 points in the championship. Fabio is still behind him, but Alex Rins is not out of the championship yet, and so it's. I think everyone pretty much agrees this championship is probably going to end up coming down to the last race, and Dorna announced this weekend that the last 3 races are a go. If you haven't been paying to the news, Spain's increasing lockdowns and stuff because the COVID thing is spreading again. But apparently the racing is still going on, so they're going to have the races. There's no fans, and everyone who goes to the paddock has a COVID test, and they're checked regularly. So it's not considering everything that's been going on. They've only had about 5 or 6 people test positive, and no one's actually gotten seriously ill from it. So what we have is next weekend is off, and 2 weekends back to back at Valencia, and then they're off to Portugal for the last race of the season. So hopefully I can get a few more weeks of riding for my bike, because I kind of like to ride it, but we've had some pretty cold, horrible weather come in, but fingers crossed. If not, I'll probably be doing another video from here and start working on the upgrades of the bike over the winter. So anyways, hope you enjoyed it. Deathstalker, signing off.